Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome back to the channel for another review. Terrell and I are getting ready to jump into our review of the new film Oppenheimer, which is going to be releasing in theaters July 21st. This is Christopher Nolan's newest and latest project. And as always, Nolan is going to Nolan. The runtime is 3 hours. The cast is stacked, and we're going to talk all about it right here, right now. But before we go any further, I want to say, while me and Terrell just left out of the theaters, we saw that different theaters. I didn't see this in IMAX. While this movie was shot for IMAX with IMAX film cameras, I didn't get to truly appreciate the visuals with this film. How about you? Did you see it in IMAX?
No, I didn't get the IMAX or XD screen for this.
Okay, well, so we were definitely gypped of that. And I will say, even for what it's worth, I'm really was impressed by the presentation of this film. This is just good cinema. And if I didn't know any better, this film release date should be in November, December. It should be definitely toting around award season, because while I don't feel the film was like over the top mind blowing in terms of all of the different aspects of putting together a good film, it just really, like, if I had to grade this like in every aspect, I'm like, oh, it's an A, it's an A, it's an A. Like, there's no A pluses or anything that was just, God tier or anything. It was just Nolan being Nolan, and we know Nolan when it comes to him directing, and he wrote this as well too, alongside of some other co-writers. You just know what to expect, and this one definitely didn't take a step forward for me, didn't take a step back. It just was exactly what I know a Nolan film to be. With that being said, like, it was just a good film. I guess, like, for it coming out in July, it's kind of like an interesting decision, because I certainly suspect that we will be hearing this film nominated during award season for different things. I'll talk about that in a second. But just for you, just on that note, what was your thought about this latest and newest Nolan project?
So I mean, I didn't go into this. I didn't see any trailers. But Christopher Nolan's a household name. So off of that alone, you're like, you're not even going to question it, right? You're going to walk into the theater. You just know it's going to be a good flick. Yeah. Not even going to lie to you, I was mad tired going into the movie, and they kept me interested enough for 3 hours. Yeah. That I was like, okay, I'm learning something here. You know what I mean? Like, I'm actually, this was interesting. It's I think I'm so used to, because Christopher Nolan, I think, has dipped his toe into different genres over the years. He's done sci-fi. We've seen him do Batman. We've seen the Memento. Stuff like that. And then kind of come back and kind of do like this, kind of sort of biography, and then tell it in a really interesting way, and do it really well, with different camera tricks and different things. It definitely kept you interested. And to hear the story of the thing that has put the moral compass on a lot of people's, a lot of people's brains. But it was definitely interesting. Like I said, I slept on it. Didn't know what I was going to get, but I was pleasantly surprised. And I think the theater I was in, man, was surprised too, because everybody, I had a crowd that was just going along. They was, when they had like those get back moments in the movies, people was getting hyped. It was good. So I definitely enjoyed it.
Yeah, and this film is about sort of say, you could almost classify it as a biography of James Robert Oppenheimer, who has been labeled a couple of different things, but certainly was billed as the physics that brought quantum physics to America. Nonetheless, he's a scientist. But like, yeah, he was labeled a lot of different things. The father of the atomic bomb. So, like, this is a story about the different milestones and the different chapters of his life into becoming, at one time, also billed as the most popular man in the world because of his invention, and because how game changing this invention was. We're talking about the development of the atomic bomb, which at one point was being developed to stop the Nazis, but once Hitler kind of conceded defeat, and then and that was the wrap, Then America was like, well, now what do we do? Oh, how about the Japanese, which we know that ultimately led to our retaliation of Pearl Harbor to Hiroshima,
Right.
and dropping that bomb that forever changed the world. So, it's the history of J. Robert Oppenheimer, who is played by one of Nolan's favorites in Cillian Murphy, who
Every movie, yeah.
who bodies this role. And I'm not just saying just strictly because he really steps into this character, and whether you know this person in real life or whether you had knew the history of Oppenheimer, it's the fact that like we see so many different points of Oppenheimer's life, and Cillian just adapted. We saw him at his earlier age where he was sort of confident in his craft, but he didn't think anybody would believe him or anybody would want to follow him. We see him taking chances with himself. We see his love life being put on display. Then we see him become one of the most popular men in the world. And then we also see a situation where the U.S. is ready to revoke his or not renew his clearance. And what did that do for him? But just to kind of go down the list of all the big names attached to this, Emily Blunt is in this as his wife as Kitty Oppenheimer. You have Matt Damon, Robert Downey Jr., Jason Clarke, who is one of my favorite actors. I had no clue he was in this. Tony Godwin, excuse me. And who else? Some other names too. James Garcia. Yeah, who?
Florence Pugh. She was
I forget about Florence Pugh. Yeah. And the list just goes on and on and on. So stat cast, and what was a bright spot for me is that really seeing a lot of these actors who have played particular type of roles really switch it up. I think you instantly look at Robert Downey Jr., who is always a lovable character. This time as Louis Strauss. Listen, I'm not going to give it away, but I'm going to say this. Play close attention to the relationship between Louis and Oppenheimer. The clues between the two of them. There's definitely a level of envy. There's a level of just beef between them that you don't initially see, and it's not initially revealed. And I'm only telling you this because it's 3 hours, and when you go in, you can start to pick up on this stuff really early instead of waiting until like the third act to be like,
right.
Keep a look at their relation throughout this film. And and the reason I'm even giving you that plot element is because you have to see Robert Downey Jr.'s performance here, because it is very deceiving, and then it's almost righteous at the end, and it's a journey in its own. But fantastic cast up and down. Even Tony, who Tony. I think when you think about him being the president of the United States as Fitzgerald Grant in Scandal, and seeing him back in the suit, I instantly was like, oh, he's the president in this. He's definitely not the president, but it was just good to see him in this film as well too. But loaded cast. That's my point on that note. Well, let me give it to you though. What's some parts about this that you really enjoyed?
I mean, definitely, like I said, going into this, getting a history lesson, whether, how much of this is embellished, for this movie, you don't know. I'm sure a lot of this is accounts, but just the government, just the U.S. being petty, man. I think it's the whole whatever of this movie. And, it don't matter what you do, how much you do it, somebody always wants something that you got, right? Yeah. And I feel like that's like the overall moral of the story. Like everybody's trying to, step up. Everybody's trying to get the name recognition. Everybody, just wants to do their work and want to work on their own thing. But like you said, I mean, like I said, a lot of different, stars, and everybody. I think everybody had their moment in this movie. It was like I said, 3 hours. It was almost enough time for everybody to really get their shine. And a lot of these actors who we've seen in recent Marvel movies and playing, superhero characters, come back and do this, their craft, this, like I said, this Oscar bait, I don't want to say Oscar bait movie, but
it certainly is.
Yeah. This is the movie where you get to see people put their act on, 100%. And like you said, you talking about like the cast. I lost count of how many people Christopher Nolan and call favors in for this movie because it's a list.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I just want to throw a couple of more names out there because like towards the end of the film, you start seeing other faces pop up in a way that you're like, yeah, you're just not gonna cast Rami Malek, and like he gets 5 minutes earlier in the film and like, is that it? And then he beats out his part towards the end of the film. Casey Affleck is in it. Like, a lot of people like Nolan, and it's evident because they definitely show up for his films.
One of the things I don't know how your sound was, but the sound was incredible. The speakers, my seat was rumbling, man. I thought I was getting hit with the bomb in the movie theater. You know what I mean? Like, the pauses of like how things started and stopped and went, and then just escalated. The sound was crazy. I got scared a couple times. I wasn't sure when it was coming in and when it was leaving, but it was incredible, man. They did a really, really good job with the sound department. Shout out to them.
Yeah, listen, one thing about Nolan, I just want to jump in there real quick and give it right back. The one thing about Nolan and the thing I'm most excited about Nolan projects is who scores the film.
Right.
Yeah, he had a long-standing relationship with Hans Zimmer, and they haven't really done much since. But he has not at all dropped off from getting the big guns when it comes down to who's gonna score the film. And he has Ludwig in this, and again, it's to the expectancy that when you have a Christopher Nolan film, you're going to have a top tier composer scoring the film, and by all means, yes, the sound did not disappoint. And that was one of my biggest things I wanted to say. Like, the sound was great. And the last thing I'll say, and I promise I'll get right back to you, is the visuals of this film, which, yes, I didn't truly get to appreciate them because it wasn't the IMAX. But when you started to go through these moments when Oppenheimer was like having these like self-conscious moments and he was having these visuals in his head and they were being depicted on the screen around him, like different visions he was having, that imagery was so good, so stimulating that I'm like, yeah, I really, really want to see this in IMAX. This is a long film, so it's going to be a struggle for me to actually go do it. But I really do want to see these visuals in the way it was supposed to be shown, and which is in IMAX, which I easily recommend that you go see this in IMAX, because there was definitely, beyond them, having moments where they were in black and white, then in full color, then you having these little imagery moments because of his conscience that he's having. It's just it's a ride, just visuals alone. And granted, if no cast member spoke the entire time and it was just that in the score, I still think the film would have been solid, just to be honest. Like, there was just a lot that this film did really good. And like, as you said, it's Oscar bait. I just can't believe it's coming out in July, because typically films that come out this early gets forgotten. That's just my take. But his name is big enough and the cast is big enough, so maybe it does stand the test of time of just a couple of months to be relevant towards award season.
And I wonder if that has anything to do, because this is under Universal now, not Warner Brothers that has been under for the last dozen films. If they had anything to do with that decision, because I mean, we all know what comes out the same day as this movie, the competition. So now it's almost like the intellectuals versus like people that just want to turn their brain off and see have a fun time, because this is clearly not a kids movie. It's a lot of deep subject matter, and they really hit you with the question: is it the creator or the creation that is the whatever? Like, they have a lot of, like I said, moral conversations about well, look, we just made it, you know what I mean? Like, what they decide to do with it, that's not on us. So we, like you said, we see a lot of pivots, like different points of his life where he did want the fame and recognition, he did want this, that, and the third, he was still trying to figure it all out, and then he swings back around and it's like, what, is this even kind of what I wanted? So definitely, definitely, because they have I guess we could say this, like, has an exchange with a big historical figure in this movie, which I wasn't expecting to get, because honestly, my timelines of who was alive when is completely just messed up. But I just thought that was big. Has a really big impact on that movie, and the conversation they had, as I was thinking about it on the ride home, it was just like, look, man, this it's on you now. You know what I mean? Like, this is your responsibility. Like, look, I told you, you could have just left it alone, and whatever. But as you see a lot of people after the whole Hiroshima thing, you kind of see the reactions of a lot of the people, like they not with it. You know what I mean? Like you see some people are really, pro America. Hey, we winning XYZ versus the people that are like, nah, this wasn't right. They couldn't deal with the kind of like what they've done. Especially when the numbers started to come in.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like you said, like the visuals of like just kind of like what he was going through and seeing like the atoms like burst and expand and multiply, stuff like that, as he's thinking about how this is going to work. That was really, really incredible, like I said. But like I said, the score throughout the movie, I think that's one of the things. If it wasn't the score, I don't think I probably would have been as tuned in, because the music definitely keeps you going as it escalates throughout the movie. So it was pretty good.
Yeah. You did bring up an interesting point that, like, this is like Nolan's first film to not be on Warner Brothers. And, as we talk about the history of Oppenheimer, I think the history of this film and the process of making this film is intriguing in itself. So I suggest folks to go look it up to just see everything that this film been through to get to this point. But even to get to this point, it's definitely a success. And like going back to all of the Nolan's films, from Tenet to Dunkirk, which the score on that was probably one of my favorite of that year. Going back to Interstellar, The Dark Knight, Inception, like the list goes on of films that are all over 3 hours or about 3 hours.
If I'm not mistaken, they had like the actual film for the portrayal. Like it wasn't like a digital thing. They had like the movie that were using actual film, because I think the guy, like, when in my projection, he had to like actually set it and to the screen and everything like that. So yeah. It's pretty definitely interesting.
Either that or they just did that just for like the whole aesthetic. But no, this was definitely shot on film. I did see some of the coverage of this film pre-strike really emphasized that like this was how it was shot, and it like they showed the reel and whatnot. And then again, hearing the testimonies from all of the actors involved, everyone talked. Robert Downey Jr. said this was the best film he ever been a part of. Emily Blunt said this was emotional. There's just a lot of different aspects of it. And speaking of that, there had been warnings about the sex scene in this film. I don't think it was as big of a deal as people made it to be, but it truly is an adult film. And like, yes, this film definitely goes down the rabbit hole in terms of like government conspiracies, the government obsession to be the first to do things, the U.S. willing to step on anybody as possible to ensure that we are ahead of the curve with everything. And then obviously, with Oppenheimer being a scientist, just his journey from overseas to bringing quantum physics to America, to becoming the most important person in the entire world, to valuing other scientists, also valuing scientists in general, in terms of their relevance, in terms of politics and whatnot. His wife, which was definitely a very, very interesting. Did I say Florence Pugh's sex scene was not as bad as well, but Emily Blunt as his wife having a journey through the story. This is the last time I'm going to say about this. I thought her story as Kitty was like, it had question marks around it. Like they really explored her sobriety, and then she has a really powerful moment towards the end of the film. But I think that's because in biographies and stuff like that, when you really highlight characters and really creating a supporting character and really creating like a profile behind this character, I think it has a lot to do with like where a lot of the information came from. So like when you look at some of the characters and like seeing the narratives around the characters, you start to think like, well, how much did their family have involvement in terms of the representation of how the depiction of how their character is being portrayed. And I think, Kitty was a character that was kind of like, I'm a little confused about certain aspects, but then I thought about, I was like, I think I get what's going on. But nonetheless, 3-hour history lesson of the master, the inventor of the atomic bomb, and all things bombs with America and war, and a very important message towards the end of it, between Oppenheimer, between another mastermind of a person that really puts things into perspective, that really makes you leave the theater like, oh, well, America.
There's a particular scene, it's not a spoiler, but there's a particular scene in the movie I just thought was kind of ridiculous. where they're like picking the intended targets, and the guy gives like his reason as the why he's not picking the
Oh
one
my
thing.
God.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
the wife went on vacation there, so we're gonna leave that alone. It's like,
Wow.
okay.
Wow.
Yeah, that was
Yeah. I
wild. So
forgot
they,
all about that. Yeah. So there's like very minimum humor in there, but when the humor strikes, it strikes. And there's definitely jaw-dropping moments in terms of the exchange of the dialogue. The script is fantastic, but how could it not be? These actors are some of the best actors in the world. You giving them a minimum script, they're going to elevate this to no end. And that's just an example of the stardom that's involved, that like you really enjoy just the exchange of words between one another in this film.
I think the score, the musical score, and the pacing of the film itself really shows the pressure of how much they needed to get this done. As they're trying to like hurry up and like, okay, we got to hurry up. We only got one shot at this XYZ, and you kind of feel it, you know, as you finally see the thing go off in the movie, and you finally feel that sense of relief as it, you know, you see the whole scene. It's pretty cool. So like I said, I wish I could have watched it in IMAX, because I feel like that scene would have been incredible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And even to that point too, like you know, there's a goal to be achieved, and what does it mean when you actually did achieve it? In that perspective about what did we do? Was it a good thing? And as you mentioned, I don't even want to steal your that phrase you said, but like the inventor over the invented. I think you said something like that.
What did I say? Yeah, something along the lines.
Something like that. It's in the beginning of the review, folks. But nonetheless, Oppenheimer in theaters July 21st. Whether you're seeing Oppenheimer, whether you're seeing Barbie, you got some good choices this weekend. You are going to see two films that certainly will have their name called to some point during award season. Both are fantastic films. Both deserve to go be checked out. And honestly, you know, and until the strike is completed, who knows what's gonna be the promotional factor going into other films coming down the line. So these are the last two films, as far as I know, big budget box office films that got the whole rigmarole, got the press tour, got the interviews and all of the good stuff. So we're going to see how they perform, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how other films may underperform because of it. So we'll see. Nonetheless, Oppenheimer in theaters again, July 21st. Folks, get in the comments. Let us know your thought, your excitement. What did you learn from this film? Because there's a lot, all that other good stuff. And we'll see you back for more reviews and content right here very soon. Thank you for watching.